And next up is Mark Kramer. The topic is Augmented Reality, Locative app, and other cool stuff. And Mark describes himself as a nomadic research fellow exploring the outer fringes of the ever-evolving information society. And he lives in Salzburg, Austria. And we will now hear about the use of technologies for the augmentation of places, things, and people. Please.
Good afternoon. First, let me make sure I get everything set up here. I might need some assistance with this. I don't know which screens to switch. Okay. And I have to stand here?
Okay, now you got it.
Right. Actually, the title that you see in the program, Wikitude and other cool stuff, is sort of a working title, but really I'd like to look at how it's influencing the theme of the seminar, which is locative media and storytelling. But before I get started, let me explain a little bit about myself in this, and also read a quote that I have here. Reality is merely an illusion, albeit a persistent one. And this is from Albert Einstein. And many of you have your own perception of what augmented reality is. It seems to be a hype currently. You have a lot of emerging startups, a lot of existing applications. But really, what is it we're trying to do? And I hope to address that question, so give you some inspiration. I have many examples which are very practical, focusing on people and places. I think I didn't hear much talk about people today, so this is the perspective I'm going to bring. And also, I'm following tweets here, so if you really have some burning questions, we can answer it throughout the presentation as well. So let's get started. Okay, the abstract. I like to skip over text. I don't like text. That's why I think augmented reality in some ways is not a very natural way to interact with the physical world, the way we do it. Imagine walking around the city of Helsinki with a phone in front of you. For me, this is not the future, hopefully. But there are advancements in technology, specifically mobile technologies, which make augmented reality a possibility. But how these technologies change the culture and behavior of people is, for me, the most exciting element. And I think this is something, maybe from this seminar, if we come away today with thoughts and ideas how it's changing society and individual and collaborative cultures, this, to me, is the success of this seminar. It's not so much the technologies. We all know what exists, but how is it really affecting us? This is sort of I wanted to give you an overview. Who am I? This is my persona. There's a lovely website, personas.media.mit.edu. You can put in your name, and then it searches from all social media sources, sort of an aggregate of who you are. So from an augmented perspective, this is how I'm perceived. This is my reality online. And for me, it's quite sad because a lot of it's online. Education is a main part of it, but what else? I spend a lot of time traveling. This is why when I say I'm a nomadic researcher, I spend a lot of time in the field, specifically on trains, observing how people use technologies or how people interact. And these are just a few images to give you a sort of an idea of my research environment. And while I'm traveling, I reflect a lot, I tweet a lot, or instead of saying tweet, I microblog. I think that's more of a very general description, because I actually started using Jaku before Twitter, and I'm still a hardcore Jaku user as well. But in terms of some reflections, this is a picture I took. I was on a train going between Salzburg and Vienna, or vice versa, Vienna and Salzburg. And this gentleman he was a rabbi. I was watching him, and he was saying prayers because it was sundown. And I was thinking to myself, okay, he's saying prayers on a moving train in Austria, and he's probably traveling to somewhere. I was thinking, what was he thinking about? And he might have been thinking about, of course, Jerusalem while he was praying. And I'm looking at this the window of the train is an interface that could be augmented and used for his reflection. And I was thinking about this because, as mentioned before, I'm working with a startup called Wikitude. I have worked with Wikitude. And Wikitude, in many ways, was really a pioneer in what we call handheld augmented reality. In Austria, in general, we have also a Doppler Labor at the University of Graz, where Daniel Wagner is a part of. And there's a lot of amazing research coming out of Austria within augmented reality, specifically handheld. And this is just a mock-up I made. So if he was reflecting on this, what would be some points of interest or aspects that he would be reflecting on? And it dawned on me that what we're trying to do actually is take information that we've released on networks and then try to connect it to a physical location. So in reality, before the internet, we had this reality we exist in, but then we put this information on networks and distributed them, and now we're taking them out of the networks back into reality. So it's kind of like we're going full circle. But the beauty of this is because now we can aggregate not just information, but knowledge and experiences from people. I think this is where a key message I want to bring out. It's not just about points of interest. It's about, okay, what experiences did you all have here today and that you could share? And not just now, maybe a week from now, you'll reflect upon, okay, that was a nice speech I heard today, but how does that affect my life? And then all of a sudden you had a eureka moment and you're able to share that and come back to this moment. So I think augmented reality is very dynamic in that sense, and this is just an example of how the physical world is becoming the platform. Now, I contrast this physical world augmented with a traditional visualization. Kype is I guess a recommendation platform where you look for restaurants or hotels or points of interest, and you read it in a text form. Now, how comfortable is this to actually consume this type of information? So that's why what many people find exciting about augmented reality is to be able to visualize this in a more natural context and a situation. So this is the key element, I think, what's exciting people about augmented reality. And my focus, as I mentioned earlier, is about people and places. So I wanted to give you some insights. I have several videos I'd like to show you, which are examples of very practical applications. And this is just a montage of the different types of services, many of them we've mentioned today. I'm not promoting any specific one, but it's fascinating. This is just the beginning. So when we look at people, there's an amazing design firm in Stockholm called The Astonishing Tribe, and they have an amazing app called Polar Rose. How many of you are familiar with this? Yeah, some of you. So in terms of focusing on people, imagine how can you augment information surrounding a person. So you could use your mobile device for facial recognition and then actually see social media content related to that. Let's click on this. This is just a small video. I don't think that the sound is part of this, but it'll give you sort of an example of how this works. So you set up your profile. You sort of calibrate based on the face of the individual by taking a picture. And then you can add the social media elements to you. And then you can release this on the platform, and then others can actually, when they take a picture of you, recognize you and access your information. So this is a way of augmenting individuals through a camera view. And then this is the pressing recognition, recognizes the face, automatically pulls up all of the data. And it shows you how seamlessly it recognizes this woman. Phone number, click on it and call. Of course, we talked about privacy today. Imagine how this will. Places. It's one example of people. I'm sure there are many other. For me, I'd rather meet a person face to face than scan them. We talked about this check-in, location-based services based on check-in, whether it's Foursquare, Goala, Brightkite. There's many others. It's sort of a craze. And this is just an example. Foursquare we've mentioned. Actually, Kevin mentioned about Dodgeball. Dodgeball was created, say, several years ago and bought by Google. It wasn't really kept alive, so to speak, but then Foursquare came out of that. They were the same developers. Koala is another example, location-based services. But how does that tie into locative media and storytelling? Because, yeah, it's great to check into a place and read recommendations, but where's the conversation? Can we really embed media? Can we actually experience a place in an augmented context? I think this is one example. This is a Swiss startup called Dokodare. It doesn't get much press. Friends of mine, I believe they have tremendous future if they find that sort of niche where they could fit in. Because it's hard to compete now with Foursquare, Goala, all these others. But the beauty of Dokodare is it's a combination of, say, a data matrix, a QR code. You can check into a place, big deal, but you can also embed media or actually get more context-relevant information. So this is a platform which could easily be used, say, in education, if you wanted to create educational experiences within the physical world. Google Attitude was mentioned earlier. This is Google's solution, which is one element of their location-based services portfolio. And I have a video which I will show. This is more commercial-oriented around places, but also ties in with people.
Say you own a business. You've noticed the challenges of attracting new customers in a competitive market. So you do your research and learn that internet search is a great tool for everyone, not just big businesses. More people use online search engines, like Google, than any other media to find local information. You want to take control of your listings on Google and let customers know what you're all about. So you sign up for Google's free Google Places. In just a few minutes, you can customize how your business is listed on Google and Google Maps. You can include things like your menu options, photos of your entrees, your restaurant hours, and anything else that helps you stand out above your competition down the street. You can even add coupons that your customers can print out and use when they visit. And now you can see information about your business that you've never been able to see before. Things like who's searching for you on Google, how they're finding you, and where they're coming from when they walk in the door. This information can help you make smart decisions that will bring you more customers. For example, you may start to see trends in the foods your customers are craving based on what they're searching for to find you. You can enhance your menu to cater to these trends. You might notice that a lot of people are coming to you from the other side of town. Maybe you could open up a sister restaurant over there. You can continually adjust your business listings on Google to improve your results based on the information you see in your dashboard. We're bringing the power of Google to you and your business. It's worth checking out. Visit google.com/places.
I share this because I think it's a very comprehensive solution.
Do you interact with your clients on the go? With service areas on Google Maps, now you can describe where you're willing to travel to do business. You can define your service area by region using zip codes, cities, or counties. Or you can let us know how far you're willing to drive from your location. Do you run your business from a private location like your home or library? No problem. Once you define a service area, you can hide your business address. To add service areas to your business listing today, visit www.google.com/places.
This is an example of Google goggles. I've created this montage to kind of save time. But what I wanted to share is that take this solution and then apply it to media and journalism. Okay, here they're talking about businesses and trying to figure out the reach of business using sort of analytics. You can track your customer base. But you could, in reality, apply the same to any media company. Google Goggles. Google Goggles is the AR solution from Google. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I've worked with Mobility, Wikitudes, and I'm actually very familiar with Layer as well. And this is one of their older presentation videos, which gives a really great overview of the different vertical markets that you can apply, not just location-based services, but augmented reality. And many of you have seen this before, but it's worth refreshing your memory. It's also worth noting, I think, what Layer discovered, or they knew from the very beginning, it's about leveraging a network of developers and people. It's not just about one startup trying to conquer the location-based services, but we can't do it alone. How do we work together to bring very creative individuals and services together to create a new way of interacting with the physical world? Now, here we are in Nokia land. Of course, we have to talk about Nokia, which I have tremendous respect for, because I think Nokia does have a future, and augmented reality is one of their key futures, even though it hasn't been officially, let's say, their full strategy hasn't been fully released yet, but Nokia Point and Find is the beginning of that. And I want to show a beautiful video, which for me is inspiring because it doesn't leverage the high-tech smartphones, but it leverages the normal phone with a camera and texting abilities. So let's watch this video. It's got great music too. So image recognition within normal media. It's a very intuitive way to interact. You point at something and you find it. It's the technology is behind the service. It's not where the people come to the front. If you notice in this video, it's very clear. You're focused on an individual and how they interact in their daily life, but the technology was there just in the background. And that for me, I mean, even the physical fact that we point something in front of us like this is putting the technology in front of us, literally. I think we need to start thinking reverse. People come first, how we interact with the world, and then build products and services on that, especially when it relates to media and journalism. So this comes to, this is one of my favorite concepts. This comes out of Fjord offices in Berlin, but also here in Helsinki is where Fjord is also headquartered. And this is a brilliant example of an AR concept which is very comprehensive. And you'll recognize some features in this, I'm sure. I must say, this is a dated video. They actually have improved this concept, and this will be coming out. So Anna has arrived in Berlin this morning after checking into the hotel. She's dipping into the street life and wants to find out what's around her. If you look closely, you notice these maps. So she's in Berlin, recognizes the buildings, the architecture, gives a short description of the landmarks that are shown in the camera view. Pointed out, you can get the weather. So the places. So what's happening around this particular place? So the blackboard are sort of like tags, so locative media that people have left. Someone is going to give a tour at 3 o'clock there. Someone had a bike stolen there. So this is very practical, I think. You can look at the history. So let's go back in time. What did this place look like in 1977 or in the 1930s? So the augmented reality layer there is a view back in history. So it puts history in context. Let's say, where are my friends? So I'm in Berlin, I'm going to serendipitously meet up with people. So that gives sort of an overview where your friends are. You can navigate to them. Maybe set up an appointment. Place to meet. Of course, then it's people there. You can read whatever they're producing on social media streams, including their journeys. So yesterday, Carl went to that concert. But Anna, well, okay, she wants shoes and women. I don't know. Something about that. She wants to go buy some shoes. So she goes shopping mode. This is actually this is a very practical business application, I think. You find out where's a store that has shoes, and then you can kind of like see the special offers in general in those stores. But then let's say she wants to compare the prices. So you go into a store and actually scan a product and then compare the prices with the stores within that mall. Now think about journalism and media. Maybe you can do the same thing with articles. Okay, there was 5 articles written about this subject here. Compare them, which had the best ratings. This example of looking for a place to live, an apartment within, again, a situated context. But she's tired, now she wants to go back to her hotel, so she uses navigation. But normal navigation, although it's very useful, sometimes people are navigationally challenged, so using an augmented reality sort of heads-up display navigation seems, for me, be more intuitive and very useful. So this is the initial concept from Fjord for a comprehensive augmented reality application.
Come on, Woody. You do it. All right, fine. There you go. Now that's impressive. Yeah, I guess it does look.
Okay. Now I have a couple other video inspirations, and then what I would like is actually leave more time for talk and discussion, because I think that's where we get the most input. So this is an example of taking an existing hard media and then augmenting it. This is also touches on the future of education. Give a little suspense here. Many of you have probably seen this video. But now we're getting into a different type of AR, which is using goggles, which I think, for me, has a more practical use rather than handset. So there's a young student who's in the library, picks a book off the shelf, and he wants to learn about Ara Praxis, which is a part of Rome, and learn about the architecture. He's probably an architectural student and wants to kind of get some more insights of this particular building. So he's reading, but maybe he's a little bored, so he pulls out his glasses to augment his experience. Now imagine doing this to a newspaper or a magazine, where within the normal text of printed media, you could have an augmented experience, including a user interface. So for me, this is a wonderful example of a hybrid of what I call mixed reality. Taking an existing product, a material product, whether a magazine, book, newspaper, and then augmenting it using goggles. Then of course, then he goes out into the physical world to the actual building, and then he's able to augment that physical reality with information. expand your imagination, expand your experience, expand your reality. So, what I like about this, okay, you're expanding existing resources. When I arrived yesterday, I flew in from Vienna to Vartana, or what's the airport? It's not really Helsinki. Actually, I thought I was in Japan because half of at least 80% of the people on my flight were Japanese. And then when I got off, I knew that I was in Finland, and I could hear Finnish, but still, Japanese all around me. I get on the bus, Japanese around me. I go to the hotel, Japanese in the hotel. I check in, I go into my room, I turn on the TV, there's sumo wrestling. And I know Suomi is Finland, and then sumo wrestling, and just fascinating. And then I met up with a friend, and we went outside, and there was these young girls dressed in manga. So my reality yesterday was, okay, Helsinki is Japan. And it's just an example of how our reality is sort of an illusion, and we are even making it more complicated with the technologies around us. But so expand existing resources, but we're also augmenting existing media. And from an educational perspective, which for me, education is going to be the main driver of development. And I think if we create the world as our classroom and find ways to augment our educational experiences, whether it's through media and journalism, this is going to be a tremendous benefit to society. So, let's see, what video is this? Oh, this is another Nokia video. I'll show you this video. Many of you have seen this, I'm sure. And then we talk about it briefly. This is actually quite a controversial concept, because a lot of people think this is not the future. But gaze tracking eyewear definitely has a future. 3D audio, we can't forget augmented reality is also about audio. And then haptic risk in terms of an actual haptic response, a physical response, is also part of that AR experience. She's not Japanese. It's using eye tracking. But again, is this the way we want to interact with our world? These are questions we need to ask ourselves. We talk about information overload. I mean, this for me is creating the conditions to be even more overwhelmed by media. And if you notice, it creates sort of a superficial way of communicating with each other, because it's very short. It's not the quality of communication that I would hope to experience. Just hope he doesn't fall in the water.
Helping you feel close to what matters. Nokia, connecting people.
Okay. So, eye tracking eyewear, our gaze tracking eyewear, visualizing our world differently. I think this is definitely the next stage of the evolution of augmented reality experiences, where you can browse and select with your eyes. The contextual interfaces, as I mentioned earlier, this rabbi on the train, and also you see this woman who's looking at the transparent surface, which projects information relevant to her day. I think this is something that's definitely going to be a part, especially locative media, because we are in public spaces, and we could use these public spaces as backdrops for locative media. Accessing relevant information. I hope that our lives are more important than just finding out the weather. I mean, this seems like the most superficial way to interact with each other is to talk about the weather, but it seems to be the most interesting example. So multi-sensory access, audio, visual, as well as haptic. And so let's talk a little bit about the examples that I showed you previously are sort of inputs. Now, if you look at located media, what are some of the augmented reality interfaces that we could use for located media? And these are just 3 examples that I've chosen. There could be many, many more, but the 6th Sense project coming out of MIT is definitely something to investigate. How many of you are familiar with 6th Sense? Yeah. How many of you also know that 6th Sense has been open sourced so that this can be further developed? And for less than $400, you can actually create the whole solution. So check out 6th Sense. Metaio and Wikitude are also 2 examples of, let's say, platforms which could currently support locative media, which would support storytelling as well. So Wikitude.me is a project I was working with Mobilize, and I've actually created an example. If any of you have Wikitude on your phones, you could actually find a spot on locative media seminar links, which links to multimedia. And then you can visualize that on your phone. So this is an example. You could embed literally media within the physical world. And this is just using a map as an example that you can upload single points of interest or single media, or you can actually upload hundreds of points at once. So that, for me, is a located media interface that exists. So, before we go into some questions, I just want to share some personal insights that I've reflected upon, I think. When it comes to augmented reality and located media, the technology is available, that's no doubt. We do experience located media on a daily basis already, whether it's outdoor advertising or whether it's through listening to media while we're in our daily lives. But there's a change in media consumption in our culture hasn't really changed as quickly. So the technology changes quicker than our behavior in culture and how we interact with media. And if we look at locative media, we also have to look at it within context and its situation. I think that's something that will change. Multi-sensory located media experiences. This is something, it's not just about visual, it's audio. And could have a haptic experience as well. We've demonstrated through a lot of these examples that augmented reality extends media into the physical world. I bring this example that the world is a platform as sort of this metaphor that it's not just what's on the web, but we're bringing it back to the physical world. As I mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, AR is currently hyped, but it does have a huge future. And it's up to us to shape that future. Either we can let the technology influence us, or we, as a society and individuals, can choose what that future is. So let's have a discussion about this. There was a couple questions. I got one, an individual was mentioning sort of the embeddedness of media. What is the history? Do we want to have a long-term history of embedded media? And I think the answer to that is, it's hard to say. When you embed media within a specific location and context, does the context change over time? Or is there a way for us to archive this media that we could just reference it later? the immediate answer that I could give. Are there any other questions? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I actually have two questions. First of all, how do you see that the progression from current media solutions
Mm-hmm.
to the AR dream world presented in the concepts
Mm-hmm.
is bridged? Because with every new with every new technology, you need to teach people to use them, and you need to do that in a sense that in small steps. For example, SMS, MMS, video, and all that. People don't pick up two revolutionary concepts. They don't. They have enough in their lives already. But small augmented developments, yes. How do you see that the AR dream world can be achieved, and with what kind of steps?
Okay, so let me repeat your question. How can we bridge traditional media today with augmented reality media?
Or how do we cross the gap from this today's boring maps and lists to the dream world of AR, which isn't actually happening in 10 or 20 years?
Yeah, you have to put it in context. For us, that might be boring, but think of lesser developed regions of the world that don't have access to a lot of the content we talk about. We actually take for granted the media consumption patterns we have, but there are parts of the world that are completely cut off. So I could answer your question in different contexts depending on what perspective. From a European perspective, I think you have a fairly educated population within Europe, especially here in Finland. So people have conscious choice how they want to consume media. Personally, it's not a very natural thing to always consume media electronically. You actually want to engage in conversations with people. Maybe you use the media as an input. If you want to go more in depth, you can draw upon different resources. But I think this culture could be instilled within the classroom. Maybe have courses which look at contrasting, existing media with new media cultures. But I think we as individuals have that choice. It's not something we can teach people. People will decide on their own. Does that answer your question?
Partially, yes. Yeah. I'm thinking about more immediate steps. Say that we have these goggles that
yes.
were in the Nokia's fabulous video. How do we go? Say that that's the reality in 30 years.
Yes.
What are the steps in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years?
Yeah.
How do we approach AR? Because this is something we discussed on a break. That there aren't any clear progressions besides. Well, for example, you had a guide there as an example,
yes.
and which had restaurant listings. We implemented eat.fi, which has a map-based interface
yes.
For restaurants, and that's a clear next step.
Yes.
But what bridges the gap between the maps to the AR dream world?
Well,
technologically and...
Yes, right. Okay, I give you a personal observation. Especially last night, we had a wonderful dinner, and after dinner, we went out to a small pub, La Lamas or something in Helsinki. And one individual knew this place. We didn't know it. So we trusted that recommendation of the individual. But it was a personal connection. So in terms of augmenting, augmented reality is more than technology. I've repeated this several times because I augment information in my daily life through people around me. It's just the technology is another channel. So if you want an answer based on technology, what is the next bridge with technology? Alan Kay, to paraphrase his quote, is that the best way to predict the future is to shape it or create it. So that's the challenge I give to you is how can you help bridge the gap? How can you observe existing cultures and then see, okay, how can we bring the next step further? But I think if I want to know something about Helsinki, I talk to a person. But if I can't get an answer, then I'll go online.
Yeah, that just seems to be the problem with the AR research. The research is so far off
It's
of the
technology
reality.
based. Yeah.
Well, the whole research is based on these layout kind of applications
Yeah.
that don't have any real world use in 20 years. You don't research something based on actual use. Actually, that's the next question.
Yes.
Considering that all the videos they are made, well, they're like utopia. You have
Yeah.
you go to a plaza that has no people in there. You
Yeah.
have just few dots. Where in real world, just in central Helsinki, we have 600 restaurants that we needed to put on the map, and consider that
It's a huge challenge.
amount of
Yeah.
data on an AR interface. Not to mention spam.
Yeah.
Waking up in your wonderful condo, putting on your goggles,
Yeah.
and seeing what you have in your emails in the morning.
You bring up a good point. It doesn't answer your question, but it brings up a point that if we start mapping and digitizing all these wonderful places, does it start to spoil it? You know, if everyone knows about this pub Layamas in Helsinki, then everyone starts going there. Then does that kind of destroy the specialness? You know, if you know something special, you know a really nice grassy knoll next to a stream or a lake where you go with your partner and you wanted to sort of have time to yourself. But if you tweet that to everyone, hey, this is where I am right now, then everyone starts going there. Then you can't enjoy that special place anymore. So it comes to another point is we tend to be very positive towards technology, but we don't question the negative impacts as much. I think this is essential.
Actually, as Finns, we do.
Of course, this is true.
Actually, relating partly to the discussions before, is location and social filtering always a good thing? Because does it limit your view on the world if you're just using your friends filtering them and all that?
A way to answer that, I think we've always had location-based services, even before the internet. Because we've talked to people. I'm coming from a small village in Finland, and I'm going to the big city of Helsinki. You know, where should I stay? You know, which cousin's house should I stay at? We've always communicated these things. So we were the location-based services people. But now, because we've digitized everything, and we've put a point or location, we're able to aggregate and sort of hyper-collect and hyper-aggregate information. Now, is that a filter? Location is a logical filter, but and then the next filter is who do you trust? What information do you trust? So friends and family you probably trust more than maybe a stranger. But sometimes friends and family don't know the answer, so then you have to rely on the next ring of comfort within your social networks. I don't necessarily have the answers, but I think location-based services has a future. How that future will play out in terms of augmented reality, I can't predict, but I do know if we're not critical of how we're creating the foundation now, then we could have a future that we're not so comfortable living with. Any other questions?
I think about being online or offline.
Mm-hmm.
Not about using big business. Because before we use the pencil and then the mouse and only one finger in one hand and so to run the technology. And now we have to take the phone from the pocket and remember to do it right.
Yeah.
And during that time we cannot live. We just do it.
Okay.
But we should need something that is just a decision if we are online or not. The glasses were a step forward, I think,
Yes.
because then we don't have to do so many extra things to make the online
Yes.
happen.
So if I understand your statement or question is, are we becoming dependent on these technologies? That this is one extra thing I have to remember to bring with me? And then we become dependent on these services. Yeah, this is a reality we need to face. if we become too dependent on these services, how does this affect us? How many of you use navigational devices to get around? And have you ever stopped to talk to people and ask them for directions too? Or do you always go to the Navi first? And well, one person. In Salzburg, there's a lot of tourism. And I always laugh when I see tourists, they bring their Navi device out of their car and then they're walking around the city. And they're always looking down onto this piece of hardware where the beauty of Salzburg is around them, but they're trying to find Salzburg and then looking at Salzburg through an augmented perspective, even though it's not goggles. So I think, are we losing an experience by becoming too dependent? And sure, what if you lose your device? Are you cut off from the world now?
Yes, it's the same thing with the usual photo camera.
Yes.
I was in Seoul and took about 4,000 pictures there, and my darling said when we came home, why didn't you take that and that picture? Why didn't you take that and that?
Yeah.
And during taking the pictures, it's not so easy to live that situation. So you have to practice very hard to learn that.
Yeah.
But if you do it enough, so you can succeed.
Yeah, that's true. Again, that's a culture that you've developed. There's a question here. How are we doing on time? We have 10 minutes? Yeah.
I just want to comment that on that you, I don't see a difference in having iPhone in your hand or a guidebook when I go to
Okay.
Salzburg.
Yeah.
It's the same thing for me. But what I wanted you to comment on or ask you is that, do you see a need for governments or educational
Policy.
institutions to really step up this augmented reality in education or for people, for elderly people or such? Or do you see that it doesn't matter if commercial markets control everything in that?
So your question is, should policymakers be more active in shaping the future of augmented reality? Of course. But the question is how much policy and regulation? Because sometimes, I'm originally from the United States, and in the US culture, we're very averse to hierarchies and authority. And it's sort of a Republican mentality, I guess. So too much policy could probably stifle innovation. We tend to see that businesses seem to kind of take over augmented reality and then create business cases and business models. Whereas, look, journalism and media is sort of behind the curve of innovation, which it should be the opposite. I think there's probably more benefits to society if media and journalism had more of a say in how augmented reality and location-based media had a say. Because, again, it goes back to changing cultures of people. And policy has a very powerful way to inspire or guide development, but it shouldn't be the final say. Because it's hard to change people's culture of how they interact, especially when it comes to embedding media in the physical world. But there was mentioned earlier, the W3C has, they're developing standards in AR. This is something we're working on. So by having standards, helps people come to an understanding which way we're working towards. There's a question up there. Yeah. Can people learn new ways of communicating?
Yeah, or is it so that you're grown up and you are born with something that how easy do you think, for example, for people, shall we say 40, 50 plus, who haven't grown up with internet and so on, for those people who haven't used them, so how easy is it do you think it is for them to learn to use, for example, augmented reality or?
You're bringing up the digital natives, digital immigrants perspective.
Yeah.
I don't like this argument that there's digital natives, digital immigrants, because everyone can learn something if they want to, if they're motivated. It's very difficult for me to learn Finnish, but I could if I wanted to. It's a question of priorities and choice. I think if people want to interact within an augmented experience, it's a matter of choice. And this is where it's difficult for us, and when it comes back to policy, should people be forced to have to consume media digitally now? Because everything seems to be moving towards that direction. And then that's a danger, because there are people who want to have paper, or they want to have a more traditional way of consuming media. They don't want to have this hyperlinked, hyper-networked way of communicating.
Yeah, actually, what I was perhaps getting at was so I guess one person could easily learn how to use them. But I mean, if the culture is very much against it, or
I think that depends on. It's not just about communication cultures, but actually the Hauptkultur, the culture around you. If you notice, for instance, since we are in Japan right now, or Finland, in Japan, many people, especially on the trams or subways, they're on their mobile devices or something because it's very rude to talk or communicate within public spaces. So the main culture there forces people to, because of the culture, it forces the communication culture to be a certain way. Whereas if you go to Brazil, this is part of my background, they're talking everywhere. I mean, it's a little more chaotic. So, but the Brazilian culture is also very more tribal. So you'll find once one Brazilian is on this social network, then everyone else is. Like, actually, the largest user base of the microblogging platform Twitter are Brazilians, from what I understand. Because it's one Brazilian started tweeting, everyone else came. So there's different ways to answer your question. But I think the communication culture is definitely influenced by the culture around us. If I'm in a sauna, I'm going to probably talk to someone, not be on my phone, because the phone will get hot.
Actually, that's kind of part of what I asked earlier.
Yeah.
How people will learn new things if they are given easy steps on how to do that and a reason to do that. For example, my father, 70 plus, who hasn't used computer ever,
really?
was very very interested in my iPad when I opened the Google Street View to his childhood home.
Yes.
And he was using the.
Well, he saw the relevance there. He saw relevance.
It was relevant, and it was easy to use. So there was it was augmented reality in a way, but it was in easy steps.
Yes.
Approachable steps. People will use and learn stuff if it's important enough for them. For example, Skype. They are using Skype because it's cheap. It's cheap to call your kids or something. It's cheap and easy to set up video conferencing, for example, and it's a reason. And they will bridge the gap, but without a proper reason, it doesn't happen.
Yes.
So we need to build these steps from current situation to the dream world.
Yeah. So in summary, I would say, if we want to encourage new cultures of media usage and consumption, or maybe we need to have best practices models, or maybe champions, people who are out and about showing, okay, this is what could be, this is how we could use it. But again, it comes down to individual choice. I don't think people should be forced into one direction. But again, back to policy. If policy says this is the direction we're going, there has to be a debate about this.
I think this is quite a nice little story to follow on from Juha, because about this value and content. I've got a friend who grew up in Pakistan, and his grandparents are very, very religious, and for the last decades they've been saying the internet is the devil's work and they don't want to go near it.
It is.
He's had some kids, and suddenly they have grandchildren, and now suddenly, well, Skype's not really the internet. That's good. Now they're total Skype addicts looking at the grandchildren.
Yeah.
So it just shows if there's enough value, they'll learn anything.
Could I add something? When you mentioned cultures thing, let's say the internet is the devil or the devil's work, I think it's a reaction to the power of any media. Because if you're forced to look outside your own culture and your own worldview, this is scary for people. And I think this is what, when we talk about locative media, it's not just about my media or media people in bed, but what is the Muslim perspective of Finland? We can experience that now. I could experience, let's say, the immigrant's perspective of Finland through an augmented experience. And we need to start thinking in these scenarios. How can we create not just delivering media, but how do we crowdsource? How do we use citizen journalism within this perspective? And how do we view different people's cultures and perspectives and understand that? This is where the power is, I think.
Yeah.
Let me see here quickly. We have 2 minutes. If there are any questions that came in. I don't think so. Well, thank you, Mikko.
Thank you. I'll borrow your mic here. Really, thank you for an inspiring presentation. Actually, this is kind of fascinating for myself because I did my doctoral thesis on camera phones.
Yeah.
And now it's sort of, instead of the camera getting information from the camera, you get put information on the camera in a sense, and this camera as a window, sort of a true viewfinder, stress on the finder. So this is also, so for a media researcher, it's totally, really fascinating. But thank you. Okay, next we will have Antti Rainio talking about spatial data, enabling service for citizens and consumers. And Antti works at the National Land Survey of Finland and is responsible for the implementation of the National Spatial Data Infrastructure. And previously he has been developing a Geographic Information System, GIS, and a concept for National Spatial Data Infrastructure at the National